Okay, thanks for everybody being here this morning. It's really pretty cold morning. We are actually going to begin really quickly. We're going to touch a few things on lesson 6 really quickly before we move into forgiveness. We'll be on page, let's see, where do I want to start on that? Page 29, or I'm sorry, 25 in your books. And we're going to start in the second on 1 Timothy 5, verse 17 and 18. Before we do that, Matt, you carry Lisa in prayer? I think it would have been wrong of me to leave out the elders here. So let's turn to 1 Timothy 5, verse 17 and 18. Talking about honoring. And when somebody gets there, take off. Hey, Roger, who are we talking about here? Okay. And how are we to honor the elders? Okay, obedience to what? Okay. We always do that? Mickey?
For the most part, we do. We're very, very blessed here.
So, when Dad was here, Elder, he wasn't. I didn't expect him to tell us all the stuff that went on, but I know sometimes when he came tired and upset, it ain't because they had a 15-minute happy sit down with somebody. It was because they probably were discussing something that was pretty conflicting and with somebody that came to him or something that was a little rough, and that happened multiple times. I'm not saying that we shouldn't bring up that the church shouldn't bring up things that if they think it is it's on their heart and something really wrong with something's going on, but sometimes they have recurring people who just want to bring up things to complain about. There's no part of honor in just letting the elders be our complain people. That's who we go to complain about every little thing that's going on, whether it be in our lives or nitpicking things in the church or whatever. It's giving them double work, not double honor. So, other than obeying, what are some things we can actually do to give them honor or double honor, as it says here? Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think that's the kind of conversation, not knowing a lot, I'm sure that's been, if you've got an elder in the congregation, and you vote full time, you know, every day, and that, whatever, spending all of his time, and needs financial support to be able to do that, and I think we got justification to do that based on the scripture. I don't think that happens in very many places, so, besides the ones you and Derek talk about, I don't know. That's the only one I've ever heard of. Does anybody know any other Dr. University? Where at?
Do you want congregation or states?
No, I just wanted to see this, because I've never heard of any of them.
Yes, situation going on,
Yeah, oh, for sure.
like Sean.
Right.
I'll be honest, I don't know that they were paid as an evangelist or as an elder.
Yeah.
But I think it has merit to be discussed for that, but that's a good possibility.
Right.
But I have one fellow that I knew for a while ago, he was on position, with the other church, you know, they both knew him on each for a period of time, so
Very good. Okay, anything else aside financially, obedience?
It seems pretty significant, I mean, considering the role of elders, it's not just regular, that's not a good way of saying it, regular resident, that's not, you know what I mean, I don't mean derogatory, but we're looking out for each other, the elders are accountable for each other. So there's a difference. So in that aspect, they're responsible for all of it, we all have our individual responsibility to have a bit of an easier responsibility than the rest of us. Honor that.
Very, absolutely. Very good, very good. The elders have a unreal responsibility for directing the affairs of the church. It's hard enough for them to make those decisions together as a group, much less us trying to interfere and get in the middle and impact those decisions. So I don't think we do that here, but I know there has been churches I've seen and been to where that has happened, and it causes major issues, even among the elder group, causing dissensions among them. It's a huge responsibility, which is why there's so many qualifications when we get to the elder chapters of what it takes to be an elder. So it's a really, really difficult task and responsibility. So us as Christians, at the very least, should show the respect they're due to listen to their decisions, listen to how they lead this church, and let them lead us. Don't mean if we think something's unscriptural. I think they would expect that from us if they were making a decision that was unscriptural, just like the preacher would if he was saying something unscriptural. I think that'd be just as much respect to tell them that. But once again, there's a time and way and place to do that that's respectful to them. So I didn't want to leave that out for the elders. It's a tremendous role and responsibility that deserves ultimate respect. I did want to do. Let's see. I did want to do one more. Yes. 1 Peter 3:7. We didn't get to hit on this last time. 1 Peter 3:7. I know there's a couple. If we have time, I might come back to some of these at the very end of our quarter, because there was a couple other ones I want to discuss, but these are the main two. 1 Peter 3:7. And when when somebody gets there. Actually, read, let's see, read verses, read verses 5 through 7, please. Whoever wants to do that.
For in this manner in former times, the holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands. Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good and are not afraid of any terror. Husbands likewise dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another, love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so in verse 7 specifically, who is getting the honor directed at them, and who is honoring?
It's the wife will give the honor by others.
Okay, this verse has been debated at times on how this is, on how. I'm not saying here. I'm just saying in general. There's different. If you read the commentaries out there, they don't all agree on how this is what understanding means. So how can wives be honored in an understanding by husbands being there in an understanding way? It says they're weaker. What does that mean? Does that mean they're weaker, like physically? Weaker spiritually? Nobody wants to pipe up on this one. Huh?
I think it has reference to, I can't recall the text, but those parts of the body that are honorable. She is their position to the man is underneath him until he can call authority by nonetheless, having the one who is in subjection to him, yet he is not to abuse her, even though she is in subjection, she is a joint heir. That's how he is honorable, or she is put in this position, she is in this position of God, and that's better than that text. She is no less joint heir. The same attitude that Jesus has built in him. You may be regarded as inferior in society, but you are a joint heir.
That's a great point. Are there societies around that don't respect women? Other countries? Absolutely. They give women one role, and based on whatever certain countries will give the women just the job of staying home, making sure and treat their husbands as a master. That's a term not like we think of master biblically here as one that's truly lording over them. So in no way, shape, or form are we to be overbearing, insensitive. I think that's part of. I thought that was somewhat part of the weaker with dealing with emotions and sensitivity and things like that. Sometimes guys don't fully understand what's going on with women's emotions and things like that. It's not our job to tell them how they feel. It's not our job to tell them how to act, tell them how to be. It's the husband's job to show respect, to be there for them. So some people think in the house, it's happens more and more, even in this county, the amount of there's over near where me and Sam work. It's probably about I guess a couple streets over. There's a women's abuse shelter, battered women with husbands, and I think it's for anybody that's been abusing a relationship, but that's where it's really got distorted. You know, somebody, you know, a man is thinking that that's they're literally over them, and anything they do that doesn't agree with what they're lining up, they don't like it. And that's where it gets ugly. That's a very gross distortion of what's talked about here. As Roger just said, they're fellow heirs. I want that to be understood. They are husbands. They are your wives, but they are also your sister in Christ. They're also a fellow representative that's going toward heaven, and they're supposed to be treated as such. There's the biggest one for me, that at least that I take of this, is they're supposed to be heard. I think a lot of I think a lot of men and husbands, you know, think leading, you're supposed to follow leadership. They're supposed to be the only one to say anything, and that's the path we're going to go. And that doesn't mean that it's the wife's job to fully be quiet and the man not to listen to any idea or thing she says. I think that's supposed to be respected, like I said, like the way Roger put it, proper respect is treating them as we should, as a fellow Christian, a fellow heir, someone who is considered special. You didn't marry your wife to be in that role of domineering. You married your wife so you can have a special partner. It just happens that God's created us roles, and that's how we should think of them. And if we treat each other in those roles that God has set up, that's the respect He's wanting us to have. It's not our idea of how He set it up; it's how God had intended to set it up. Anything else on how we should honor our wives? That's the last one I wanted to bring up. So, anything else before we're going to move on to lesson 7 here?
Which I don't know if that's never again, but anyway, I was looking at it. Husbands likewise submit by living with your wife in ways that honor her, knowing that she is the weaker partner. Honor her all the more, that she is also a co-heir of your heir life. Who is so very
I didn't mention the last part there. It's how tall the task is, guys. If we don't do this right, prayers are going to be a problem if you're not dwelling with your wife correctly. It's something I'm sure that, as I feel like that's probably not a problem here. That's something I'm sure we all can be better at. There wasn't a time when, I said before, Sean and Diane were here, where that was their, what I always called their specialty of husbands and wives and everything like that. There wasn't a time where it didn't matter how many times he had a class or how many sermons he talked about it, I didn't learn something new about how to deal with Morgan and vice versa. So it's just, there's a, God gives us the instruction guide on how to respect each other and honor each other. It's not our job to interpret how we are to think those roles are. It's God's, and God has the plan to do that. Okay. Very good example, because weaker but of great value. How much we value China. That's how we should value our spouses. Very good. Excellent. Okay. Anything else before we move on to forgiveness? Okay.
A wife who would come to us with concerns that she was being abused and treating her in the same way and not, you know, abuse is confusing, and so a wife would not want to come and say, that may come and say something like, I can't seem to please my husband, I can't seem to do anything right, and treating her in this way by listening and trying to draw more of the story to get more information versus sometimes we immediately want to say, well, have you tried this or that or the other? And just kind of being aware that abuse is out there, like you were talking about, it's out there and it does exist. And if there's statistically no difference between incidents of abuse in the world and incidents of abuse among those that call themselves Christians, and so just being mindful. And if a wife were to seem to be oppressed or say that she's being oppressed in some way, treating her in this way as fellow Christians, we being understanding and wanting to listen.
Very good. Very good. Okay, thank y'all very much. Chapter 6, let's move on to chapter 7. Let's go to forgiving one another. Ephesians 4:32 says, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ, God, forgave you." As Christians, we are possessed by a spirit or an attitude of forgiveness. We're going to make, we're going to have issues with each other. There's going to be mistakes. Nobody, we've said before, nobody's perfect. There's going to be people say and do things. Sometimes it's people that's really close to us that are just going to do things that hurt and offend us. We have to be prepared to forgive others, as we're going to learn in this lesson, as we have ultimate examples to do that God does for us. We never can control what is given to us, but we can control what we give back. It's not our job to try and fix people here who want to keep poking or prodding or arguing. It's our job to be an encouragement and encourage them to not do that. But we can't make them change what they said. But we can really help our attitudes on how we handle forgiveness in this church, in our church. And I speak directly to this one because there's been times over the last so many decades where it's been that's been a problem here and other churches and in this society in general. It's just forgiveness is a big problem. Not just in this country, around the world. It's a major issue. But we're going to look at some really good examples of people in the Bible that have that forgiving spirit we can learn from. We're going to look at in God to see how He forgives and the kind of people He forgives. I'm hoping to get out of this lesson that a couple things, that forgiveness really doesn't have a time frame on it. It doesn't really have a subject on it in regards to, doesn't really matter who it is or what it's about. Forgiveness is, as all these things that we learned in here are qualities we are supposed to work to have as part of us. So that takes practice, especially forgiveness. Because if we can't, as we're growing up, if we can't forgive our brother and sister who we're growing up with for doing things to us, and we can't forgive mom and dad for punishing us, and how in the world are we going to forgive these people we're just learning to get close to, and these fellow brethren of ours for things if we don't learn to make that to make that part of our lives. I want to start by going to Acts 7. And don't get me wrong, I think I love the verses talking about, we're going to get to these with Christ and when he's on the cross, but this is one this is one I actually was writing down as I was starting to go through the book, and I realized it was already in here. This is one of my favorites. So if somebody can read Acts 7, and once again, I wanted to start just a little earlier than the writer gave here. Well, let's see here. No, on this one, just go ahead and read. Whoever gets there, just read verse 54 through 60. Okay, before we get to verses 59 and 60 there, we haven't identified who we're even talking about here. It says, now when they heard this, they were cut to the quick, and they began gnashing their teeth at him. Who's him? Okay, Stephen. Who's Stephen talking to here? Back in verses, basically the start of chapter 7, verse 1 through 53. Okay. 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 So, very good. I heard council, I heard Jews. I think this is definitely a very much highly Jewish crowd here. And that would make sense based on the fact that his sermon was causing a problem. What about what in his sermon was he telling them that was causing them to start getting a little upset? Okay, and what has he just told them? You have done what? Say it again.
In verse 51, he says that they resisted the Spirit, and then 52, they had crucified and killed the prophets and the Messiah, and verse 53 didn't go on.
Okay, so does anybody not get similar undertones to Acts 2 with this one? It was a very similar sermon taught. Now, there was other things he was accusing them of here. That it was in Acts 2, it was mainly, you have crucified Christ. What are you going to do about it? That's basically what Stephen was doing here. He was basically saying, what are you going to do about it? Do we think Stephen was just poking at them here? One man versus thousands of Jews. He just decided to start poking them. I think he was looking for a result, okay? And he got a little different result than Peter got, didn't he? So they decided to do what to him? Stone him. We're preaching similar words not too long before. Some of these Jews probably already hearing a similar message like this before, and they couldn't handle it. Maybe because this crowd was, I think I heard Sanhedrin back there, once again, council may have been really heavily influenced some of the Jewish leaders as well. It could have also been a problem. But Stephen's message had absolutely just made them go crazy. I mean, stoning. Me and Brian were talking about this last time. How awful the process was of stoning back then, and that was the first thing they jumped to here, just based on words. I mean, he was showing no signs of aggression, just preaching to them. And with that, you've gone into a highly Jewish crowd. You as a Christian have gone to a highly Jewish crowd, gone to a major crowd, have decided to just tell them exactly their condition, okay, what's going on with them, to provoke hopefully a good response. And this is what you get. And what does Stephen respond that Michael read in verse 59 and 60? Okay, God forgive them. Stephen could have said a couple things, in my opinion, that weren't even, that he could have done a couple things, in my opinion, that wouldn't have been bad. He could have said nothing. Could have just taken it and died, and just gave up spirit. I don't really see anything wrong with that. I mean, he did exactly what God told him to do, and he would have died for the cause of Christ. There's at least not recorded a lot of other messages like this where somebody did say forgive them. You know, we know other apostles and everything died for the cause of Christ and other disciples. Not saying these words. And then he also could have maybe said things along the lines of as he was starting to get stoned, like Paul's utterances that he had, where he's ready to go now. He's getting beaten. It's just take me, God, just take me. But before he uttered his last breath, he said, forgive them. And there's only one other person in the Bible that, while they're getting killed, has said those words, which we'll get to in a second. So, man, I wish Stephen could have had a bigger excerpt in the Bible. I love Stephen. So, how do we think he got that kind of attitude while getting killed, not thinking of himself as he's going through pain like that? He's thinking of those. And that was very what I said. He wouldn't have been wrong for thinking of maybe his thinking of others in his family or fellow Christians. What if that was right? If that was on his mind right before he died? Like, I hope they make it through this. And those are all great things. You're still thinking of others. He's thinking of the worst dudes ever right now. I mean, he's thinking of some vile guys. I mean, guys that literally just started killing him after he said these words. So, how do we think this attitude from Stephen, came about? I mean, how do we go about thinking about Stephen right here, with realizing how this impacts us? Okay.
Shelley's thought
Michael was saying a second ago, through verse 50, we were good. He just uttered 6 more lines, 10 more lines of words here that caused the problem. He could have stopped. Other than being a man of forgiveness here, he's definitely a man of conviction. He's a man that was going to do what he was there set to do. As we're going to get in a second, it seems to be Paul's attitude as well. But Stephen's one of my favorites here because he hits, like I said, he hits home to me in the sense of, I'm not saying I hold, that any of us would hold grudges or anything, but how many times have you had a family member or a best friend or somebody that you just truly love in this world, and sometimes you forgive them, but it takes you a little bit. It takes you a second for something that's just really gone a little wrong between you. And I think of that every time with Stephen, that, who am I? I can't forgive. I can't forgive, quicker or forgive this person who I truly care about. And Stephen's asking forgiveness for people he don't even know and who hate him. That is, it doesn't give you the secret recipe to that in here. We'll keep reading some more examples, but that's something we need to continue to search through the scriptures for and continue to search for to find how we make that part of us, the attitude that Stephen had, because that did not come just by a quick choice he made. I mean, that was something I think he went into this sermon with. I think he was prepared to forgive and be a martyr before he spoke the first word of this lesson. So it's something that's pretty heavy. It's something we need to really think about this, how the kind of spirit we need to have in regards to those around us. And like I said, if you want to start, if we have a forgiving problem in general, yeah, obviously you need to forgive those close to you. That's where you need to start. But the attitude needs to go well beyond that. I've told y'all last class, there's a couple people that I work around that you wrong them one time, they're not going to forgive you. And the reason I know that because I hear their stories over and over again of, this person just won't hush or shut it or whatever, and they're not willing to ever get past some things they've done to them years ago. That's just not the attitude that we're indicated to have here. When I read this, if God has expected me to hold to this example that Stephen had here, it's a little bit scary thought, because that's it's pretty special here with what Stephen did. Anything else on Stephen? I want to try and get to Paul real quick before we stop. Good. Yeah, we're going to get to that. That was going to be a point I was going to bring we'll get in next class, but think about that as we go into next class. If you have forgiven, that's a really good point, Carol. If we've forgiven, okay, but you always have in the back of your mind that I never forget, as in my guard's up, and I'm never going to forget exactly what you did to me. But we're good. Me and you were good. Have you truly had the attitude God expects you to have? And like I said, we're getting this next time. But when God forgives, what gets wiped clean? Your slate's clean. You're good. I think some people have countered that when I've said that before with, well, he's gonna roll call your sins when you get to heaven. That doesn't mean he's not forgotten your sin, as in he's not holding that against you anymore. That's a little difference there. But I want to discuss that next class of forgetting and forgiving, and those are two ugly twins there that we need to possibly associate together.
Well, I would also, if we compare to that, I would also say that when God says, I will remember your sins no more, I don't think it's reasonable to read that as God has decided to have a memory problem.
Correct.
And so, what does that really mean? There's not a Men in Black flashy little thing that you all of a sudden erase all your memories. That's not realistic. That's not a reasonable expectation. So what, if people want to feel like God forgive and remember the thing, well, what does that really mean?
And that's the exact segue into next class. It's perfect. That was a cool little flashy thing, though. That was really neat. I'm now getting to Paul. Because there's a couple points I want to make about him. Although that was my favorite example of forgiveness in Stephen, as I think probably a couple of you heard me say before, Paul's my guy. He's my favorite character in all of the Bible. So I wanted to spend a second on him when we get into next class. They're about to ding us here in just a second. Before they do that, does anybody has anything else on Stephen or forgiveness in general, or something they want to get on everybody's mind before next class we need to discuss?
Yeah, just one more on Stephen, just to get to think about, because I'm wrestling with this too. Where does forgiveness happen? It's got to be in the heart of the forgiver, right? Because these people did not desire, accept, respond, care. So what? That's a hard one to compare with some other passages. So where does forgiveness happen? And if Stephen forgives you, what does it mean? How does that compare to the other passages about forgiveness? I think it's a good challenge. I think that comes up later in the class.
It does. When a direct verse actually says, basically, forgive those when they have come to ask.
Right. So how do you reconcile those thoughts? I think it's an important part of understanding or how the rest of what forgiveness is.
So that'd be two good points to start with. Forgiving, and then what Michael said with forgiveness, and what does that look like? Does someone have to come to us and ask for forgiveness? How do we jive with what Stephen did, with what some other verses say about how when people come to us, do they have to ask for forgiveness for us to actually give that? And are we talking about actual verbiage there? Or are we saying it should be, an attitude thing? We'll start with that after we get through Paul and Jesus. We'll start really talking about those two subjects. So please do some research on that and look at those, because like I said, not all those verses seem to line up exactly with what Stephen did in that. So anyway, I appreciate those comments. We'll start with that on Wednesday, and we'll just finish up lesson 7. That's it.